So hello everyone, my name is Andrew Young. I'm the CEO of BedX Protocol, and today I'm going to be talking about hypercapitalism, which is or I should say our team's long-term belief on the societal impacts of crypto, essentially why anyone should care. So for most of human history, human interaction happened purely in the physical realm, and it was only with the advent of the internet that increasingly both social and cultural interaction happened online. So we went from getting our news from the physical New York Times to getting our news from social networks like Twitter. We went from talking face-to-face with each other to talking on Facebook and other social networks. And the easiest way to look at this is the average American now spends 30 hours online, and it's increased 100% over the last 5 years and doesn't look like it's going to be stopping. To us, crypto is the securitization of digital interaction. What I mean by that is it turns digital interaction into a financial market. It allows also humans to interact with each other economically for the first time in a purely digital format. So the easiest example obviously is going from US dollars to digitally native currency like Bitcoin or DAI, starting paper legal companies, doing IPOs with Goldman Sachs on the New York Stock Exchange, to creating essentially tokenized equity with ERC20 on Ethereum and doing an ICO and being traded on Coinbase. So hypercapitalism is essentially when you put those two trends together, it's what you get. So the increasing digitization of human social and cultural interaction, and then the crypto enables the tokenization, or I should say the financialization of that interaction, and you get hypercapitalism, which really has three main implications. The first is the rapid creation of new asset classes, an exponential increase in the types of markets and number of markets that are coming in online. And finally, the one that's most interesting to me is it brings things that used to exist purely in the social and cultural realm into the economic domain. And the easiest example is, a great recent example that just came up, is what's happening with Reddit Donuts right now. So Donuts is essentially, Reddit is a social network where essentially people post on forums, and there's a subreddit called ETH Trader where you actually earn reputation for posting these posting comments that get lots of likes, and it's called Donuts. And recently, someone actually tokenized these donuts and created a market around them, and so now there's like essentially a market price on human reputation. And so what's interesting about this is Reddit digitized human reputation, and crypto has financialized it. And it's brought something that used to be purely in the physical realm into purely in the physical social realm into the digital market-based realm. And I'm going to go through lots of different examples of stuff like this. So what we're working on is BedX Protocol. It's a generalized derivative protocol built on Ethereum. And we're fascinated by these new types of markets that are coming online, and particularly around creating derivatives on these new types of markets. And I'm going to talk about three extremely interesting ones to us, though we think they're a little bit far away. So the first one is basic attention futures. So I'm sure, as all you know, basic attention token is an internet browser that collects your data for you as you browse the web. It's called Brave. It's got about 24 million downloads. And if advertisers essentially collects your data and blocks ads, and if advertisers want to advertise to their users, they have to pay them in basic attention token. So essentially, basic attention token puts a price on human attention. And we think in the future, if basic attention or some sort of derivative of it really takes off, the fluctuations in the price of human attention will have economic impacts on different stakeholders. An easy one to think about is advertisers. So similar to how corn farmers hedge fluctuations in the price of corn by buying a futures contract, you can think of in the future advertisers will buy futures on human attention to hedge the fluctuations in the price of human attention. Another one that we're really interested in is interest rate staking swaps. So interest rate swaps is a $200 trillion notional market, and the staking yield in a proof of stake based network is effectively the interest rate for that crypto network. And something that we thought about a lot is that there's going to be a lot of entities that have huge economic exposure to fluctuations in the staking yield. So for example, this is the annual staking yield for Ethereum's Casper as more people stake and less people stake. So it can fluctuate between over 10% to below 2% based on how many people are staking in the network. It's essentially like a demand curve. And what's interesting is that there's going to be custodians and proof of stake as a service entities that have large economic exposure to fluctuations in the staking yield. And so they essentially could enter into an interest rate staking swap with a trader, effectively passing the floating rate of the staking yield to a third-party speculator in return for a premium, and in return receive a fixed premium. So like if you were like essentially a staking as a service provider that was break even at a 5% staking yield, and you were worried that the staking yield was going to go below 5%, you could essentially enter into an interest rate staking swap. This one's a little bit more sci-fi, but another thing is DAO credit default swaps. So a good example of that would be MakerDAO, which I believe is speaking after this. If you were a large holder of DAI and you were worried about the solvency of MakerDAO, you could enter into a credit default swap that references MakerDAO, effectively insuring you in case MakerDAO enters into a solvency issues. And we think DAOs are going to increasingly take up more and more, make up a larger and larger percentage of economic transactions. And so we think there's going to be lots and lots of different derivatives that emerge from this new type of entity. Maybe you could create one on Melonport if you were really worried. I don't think anyone would buy that swap though. Okay, so however, crypto network adoption at this point is still very low. We see two main reasons why. The first is extremely high friction, both the cost of going from fiat to crypto, and then also once you're in crypto, the cost of essentially transactions, given kind of the scalability of public blockchains at the moment. And then finally, it's also a very narrow audience. So essentially at this point, around 80% of crypto users are essentially speculators, and around young males who are essentially speculators. And so because of that, there's been very low demand. So we think the first crypto networks, and therefore the first types of derivatives on those crypto networks that are going to take off, are going to have low relative friction. What I mean by that is a use case that has extremely high friction currently, so that the relative friction of crypto is actually low, and as well is going to have a large audience overlap with crypto users. So it's going to be speculative types of use cases, and we think those are going to be extremely high demand. So that's actually why the first market that we're launching is the world's first peer-to-peer crypto sports betting exchange. Essentially, currently sports bettors are charged extremely high fees. They're geographically limited, and they're actually punished for winning. So I have a good story. Essentially, my older brother is a very large sports bettor, and 2 years ago, the Theresa May, the UK Prime Minister, essentially announced a snap election 2 months before the election was supposed to happen, because she had a 20% national lead in the polls over the Labour Party. And then over the course of 2 months, her lead shrank from 20% to 5%. And Bet365, which is the largest UK sportsbook, they actually offered markets on every individual MP race. So you could bet on 650 different races. And the thing is, no one was betting these types of races, because who's betting on local MP races? And so essentially they had extremely stale lines. They hadn't moved the line since the lead was 20%, and now it was 5%. And so my brother and I, we went and bet on 17 of these different races on Labour to win, in races that they essentially hadn't lost in 40 years, but they were being given, like, essentially being priced like an underdog or a toss-up. And it was June 6th was the first day, and we bet on 17. And because it's a UK sports book, so it's really hard to get money into these things, we had to wait until the next day to put more money through a wire. And when we woke up the next day on June 7th, the day before the election, we got an email from Bet365 saying, we've noticed irregular IP address activity, and so therefore we've lowered your betting limits. And when we went to the platform, we could only bet $5. Our lines had come down from 4,000 to 5. Essentially what happened is they realized that they had mispriced these lines, and they effectively kicked us off. That wouldn't happen in a decentralized crypto exchange, because in a decentralized crypto exchange, bettors are betting with each other. They're not betting against a book. The problem with a book is that they take the opposite side of every trade, and so the only way for them to make money is if their users consistently lose money. And so because of that, users lose money consistently. Less than 10% of bettors actually make money long term. And there's all sorts of other issues like getting kicked off, being unable to get your money off the platform as well, and just overall extremely high transaction fees. The typical juice in sports betting markets is around 7%, which doesn't make any sense. We think sports betting should be its own asset class with the same types of transparency and market-driven forces as the New York Stock Exchange. Like it would be crazy if you went to the New York Stock Exchange and you couldn't see any of the bets that had been done that day, and you couldn't tell how the prices were being given for odds, and that's exactly what sports betting is today. So how SportX works, SportX is the first DEX on top of the BedX Protocol. So BedX is a smart contract protocol that essentially allows the decentralized creation, trading, and resolution of these types of derivatives. And SportX is a relayer built on top of the protocol that allows users to trade sports-related markets. We have stablecoin integration, so all of our bets are done in DAI, essentially relaying style, 0x style relayer, and US dollar on-ramp. So we really want to go after the non-crypto native audience. So we're building in a fiat on-ramp onto the website. And finally, proof of liquidity. We didn't do an ICO, we raised equity. And so that allows us a lot of flexibility in terms of tokenomics. And one thing we're really interested in, I think Ryan Zur talked about it a lot yesterday, but is this idea of proof of liquidity, which is this idea that as users, you distribute token based on usage, based on them providing value to the network. And proof of liquidity is this idea where as users bet on the platform, they actually earn tokens back, because when they bet, they're creating liquidity, and liquidity is the only moat we really have. So yeah, if anyone's interested, please join the community. We're currently 4 weeks away from launch. We're launching right before March Madness, which is the largest sports betting event of the year. This is actually our official launch. We've been in stealth for the last 13 months. And so we have around 400 people signed up to use the platform on day one. We think within the first month we're going to be the largest app, because we think sports betting is the perfect use case. And so if anyone's interested in joining the community, please reach out to me, I guess, after this. You can find me at AY, here I can go back to my Twitter, but you can find me on Twitter, it's AY/BedX, and you can look at our website, which is obviously sportx.bet. Thank you.
Cool. So that's pretty interesting. Are there any questions before? Oh, there's a few questions.
Thank you. How do you resolve the outcomes of the events?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a similar style to Augur and other prediction markets, where essentially the creator of the market first reports on the outcome, and then there's essentially there's a short period after they report on the outcome in which anyone can challenge the outcome of it, and then if that happens, it goes to essentially a token-weighted vote, which happens every 2 weeks. It's a delegated proof-of-stake model, where essentially you have a committee of 30 members who are elected based on total amount of tokens that they own or have been delegated tokens to, and they essentially vote on what the outcome is. And then we use the same sort of mechanics that all oracles are based on, which is truth coin white paper, where essentially there's a slashing penalty if you vote against consensus.
Any other questions? Doesn't seem like it. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that with us.